motor part is the muscles of facial expression. If you remember cranial nerve 5, which was trigeminal, the mandibular branch of that got the muscles of mastication. So these muscles of facial expression, we're talking about auricularis oris, auricularis oculi, zygomatic major, minor, all those different muscles. Okay. And again,
does that show it?
if you remember cranial nerve 3, which was ocular motor,
All of it?
contained
Does it show all of it?
visceral motor also, and that we're going to see in the autonomic nervous system is parasympathetic. We'll also have visceral motor here, parasympathetic, and that's going to basically the lacrimal glands, submandibular and sublingual glands. Okay? And we'll see parasympathetic is involved in rest and digestion. Okay? So, depending upon, again, if it's sensory or motor, the origin where that nerve starts out is going to be different. If it's sensory, it's going to be outside the central nervous system, and the fibers are bringing information in after. If it's motor, it's starting in the central nervous system, and it's efferent, traveling out. So the sensory part of this, the origin is going to be the tongue, for basically the sensation of the tongue. It travels into basically the body. The motor is going to start in the nuclei of the pons and travel out and go to those muscles of facial expression. This nerve, you guys, goes through the temporal bone. It goes into that internal acoustic meatus, travels through the bone, and comes out through that stylomastoid foramen. Okay. Destination, sensory, is coming in. It's going to be in the pons. And somatic motor is, since it's going out, is going to end up in all those muscles of facial expression. In the visceral motor, the autonomic part, lacrimal gland, subnasal mucosa, submandibular, sublingual glands. Okay? And here's a picture of it. The facial nerve is basically going through the intraocular meatus and then out through that stylomastoid foramen. And here it is right here. Just to get you back to the same page we were before, remember Ote. So start here. Well, that's your ocular motor. Then we tee off to cochlear, trigeminal, abducens, and now facial. The other thing I want to add, somebody mentioned the other day, that they had a relative that had this, and this is called Bell's palsy. And this is where a lot of times it's just a virus, and you wake up in the morning and your side of your face is drooping. You have paralysis. And maybe your tongue is even numb. And it's because where that nerve goes to the temporal bone, it either got inflamed or swelling, and now that nerve's not working right. The classic story is I went to bed with the window open, and I woke up and now my face is drooping. Because they had cold air coming in. You'll hear that story. Most of the time, and that's called Bell's palsy, so it's really a paralysis of the facial nerve on one side. And most of the time, it's self-limiting, and it will go away, but not always.
So is it like full paralysis or something?
It could be both, but it could be full paralysis too. Sometimes it's just weak, but you'll see their face will sag, their eyelids will sag, and it's, they'll drool out the side of their mouths. It's quite common, you'll see it. So that's what Bell's palsy is. So, eighth cranial nerve, purely sensory, called vestibular cochlear. So it actually has two parts to it. We're going to look at this ear a lot closer when we do sensory. Okay, you'll learn about the ear completely. We'll look at it in the lab, and so you'll understand a little bit better. But the two parts, the vestibular branch and the cochlear, then comes together to form the vestibular cochlear nerve. And so, since it's sensory, it originates in the inner ear, inside the temporal bone, where these sensors are. The vestibular part is for balance, for equilibrium. The cochlear part is what you hear with. Okay? And so the origin is going to be these receptors in the inner ear, and it just comes right out through that intraocular meatus, and it's going to go into the pons, now you see it into the nucleus. It's kind of on the border between the pons and the medulla, so you have some of it in the pons and some of it in the medulla, is where it's at. And if you look at it, this is the cochlear part, that looks like a snail. Here's the vestibular part, and so here's your vestibular cochlear nerve. You can see it kind of going into this groove between the pons and the medulla. And again, this is abducens right here. That would be facial. And so we came down the midline, we hit abducens, we stay in this slot right here. And you go over, you get facial, and then the next nerve over is going to be this vestibular cochlear, number 8. And so you can see how we go. Same thing. Olfactory, optic. I'm going to do it for you this time. Ocular motor. You tee over to trochlear, trigeminal. Back over abducens. And you see how you're in that little groove right there between the pons in the medulla. Stay in that groove and start going lateral in abducens. The next one is going to be facial, and the third one now is going to be this vestibular cochlear. So if you follow these patterns, it helps you remember these. Okay? And this is that interacoustic meatus right here. Okay, that's the vestibular part, the cochlear part. And this other nerve traveling in here is going to be that facial nerve sitting right there. Okay? We okay with this? Yeah.
The cochlear branch, is that what they work with when people get cochlear implants?
Yeah, that's the one where they're trying to stick something in there that then they connect it to that nerve and then try to stimulate that nerve. Yeah. Because the mechanism in here is not working properly.
Oh, okay, so that's where it's not working when people can't hear.
In my understanding, the cochlear implant, they're plugging kind of into this nerve somewhere. I don't know exactly how they do it. And so, and when we study the nerve, we'll look at, when we study the ear, this ear, you'll see how this whole mechanism of hearing works. It's pretty fascinating. It's kind of cool, you know. In my understanding, that's what's not functioning. Okay. And so if you get a cochlear implant and you get some sound, you're not going to be hearing like we do. You know, it's going to be a little bit different. There's actually some YouTube videos out there. If you're interested, I saw one the other day. I had it reserved somewhere. I have it. In fact, I don't think it's a YouTube video, but it's a video of a girl that's hearing through an implant for the first time in her life. It's pretty cool, you know. They actually use a computer to kind of dial it in, and they're asking her questions and stuff. And finally, she realizes that she can hear it. Not real good, but she can make out noise. So it's kind of cool. So that was 8. This is the 9th cranial nerve. Remember, you guys, your Roman numerals 9 is a 1 with an X behind it. Okay. And this is called the glossopharyngeal. So again, up till now, you probably have noticed that the names make some sense with what's going on with the nerve. Okay? And so glossopharyngeal, what's that tell you? It's going to have something to do with the tongue and the pharynx, right? And so this is a mixed nerve, and so it's picking up that posterior 1/3. Remember, the facial got the anterior 2/3, and plus sensory in the back of the throat in essence, okay? The palate and the pharynx. And so that's the sensory part. The motor part is going to be for some of those pharyngeal muscles for swallowing. Now, what we're going to see is this nerve, along with 10 and 11, all have some function with the pharyngeal muscles for swallowing. So they all contribute to that. What's cool, too, is they all are going to go through the same hole. So 9, 10, and 11 are all going to pass through that jugular foramen. Okay? So that helps you. So the origin of the sensory is going to be the posterior 1/3 of the tongue, the back of the throat, and the origin of the motor part is going to be in the medulla oblongata. It passes through the jugular foramen. What we're going to see is 10 and 11 pass through the same hole. And so the destination, the sensory, in other words, after coming in, so it's going to be into the medulla, and the motor is going to basically be those pharyngeal muscles. Okay? And I don't have it up here on the slide in words, But this also has visceral motor, and I'll show you where that is. So, what you end up doing here, this is where when you look on these little pictures in your book, it really helps you, okay? Remember, we did, I'm going to make you guys do it this time. Start down here. What's that? Now, when you look at this, what happened, remember how we kind of go boom, boom down the line with the O's and we tee off on the side of the pons? And now we come back at that groove between the pons and the medulla, and we're coming along there to 8. What happens now, here you can see, this here is that groove. You now drop down on the side of that olive. See that olive right there? And so you're on the lateral side of it, and we're going to see here is going to be 9, 10, and 11 along that groove. And so that's where you head to next on these. And you can see here's the nerve, and basically the glossopharyngeal, and it's getting these muscles here, okay, and the sensory. So the sensory is the back of the tongue, the back of the throat, and you're getting these pharyngeal muscles for the motor part. Now here is the other visceral motor part. So this carries parasympathetic, and this is the parotid gland, that gland right here that's on your masseter muscle. This is a parotid gland. As a sidebar, sensory also is right here, and this is your carotid bulb, where you have your common carotid artery going into the internal and external carotid. And so you have sensors in here. What do you think those are monitoring? Blood pressure, yeah. So you're getting some blood pressure monitoring with this one, on the sensory part. I just didn't include that, but that's one of the parts that it does. Parotid gland, visceral motor. Okay. Number 10, vagus nerve. Mixed, but this nerve you really want to kind of understand a little bit. We'll look at it closer in autonomic. Okay. This nerve travels real far. Okay. This carries 80% of what we call the parasympathetic system. Okay, which is part of the autonomic nervous system. So most of the parasympathetic is in this nerve, and so it has a visceral sensory, somatic motor, and a visceral motor. The visceral sensory and the visceral motor, this nerve travels from the neck to all the organs in the chest and in the abdomen. Okay, up to the transverse colon. So, distal on the transverse colon going to the descending colon, we're going to see that comes from the sacral plexus down low. But everything else up to that point, for visceral motor and visceral sensory, is coming from here. So what we're saying is the control, let's say like gastric secretions for acid, is going to be with this nerve, a lot of it. Okay. Control of heart rate as far as the parasympathetic input to slow it down is going to be with this nerve. Constriction in your bronchi are going to be with this nerve, plus the sensory of what's going on in your lungs. So all those visceral organs, you're going to have sensors that are going to travel back up in the neck through this nerve, and then your visceral motor will go down this way too. Okay, and I'll show you a picture of that. Somatic motor, just like we saw in cranial nerve 9, glossopharyngeal, it gets the palatopharyngeal muscles. Okay, and it passes through the jugular foramen, just like the other one. And so the destination sensory is coming back to the medulla. Motor is going to be going to these muscles and all those visceral organs. So let me kind of show you this nerve. Here it is, the vagus. This nerve right here was glossopharyngeal. Right next to it, next to that olive, is going to be the vagus. And you can see how it travels. The motor part just goes here for somatic motor to the pharyngeal, it helps swallow. But all the visceral motor, all these organs, all the way up until about the mid portion of the transverse colon. And so that means the monitoring secretions of the pancreas, the liver, gallbladder, all these things, heart, lungs, everything in here, esophagus, is being basically any sensory monitors with this and any motor, visceral motor changes. Okay. An example of this, we'll look at this in digestion. Early on, peptic ulcer disease, we knew was caused, at the time we thought it was stress and too much acid in the stomach. Okay. We now know there's another factor that has to do with the bacteria. And so, for a long time, we didn't have any way of treating acid in the stomach except for taking antacids and stuff like this, and that didn't work very good. And so for many years, the surgical treatment is what was the best for basically controlling peptic ulcer disease. And what you were treating were the complications of it. Because people that present with peptic ulcer disease sometimes just don't present with pain, but rather present with really bad complications. An example, if you're boring an ulcer through, you can perforate right here, and now you have gastric acid spilling in your peritoneal cavity. The other thing is it could bore posterior and hit the gastroduodenal artery, and now you've got an arterial bleed that's massive and can be life-threatening. You can get ulcers that scar up the emptying of the stomach, and the stomach can't empty. And so these are really severe complications. And so for a long time, it was very difficult to treat. And so one of the gold standards of treatment for peptic ulcer disease was to remove the acid-producing cells. And so they would do an antrectomy, where they would come in and cut out this portion of the stomach, and at the same time, they would reach up and cut the vagus nerve. And so it was actually called a gastric antrectomy bilateral vagotomy. And so they would basically cut the vagus nerve on both sides. The other side of it's on the back side of the esophagus. And you would cut a section of it out. And that was really the standard of care for peptic ulcer disease for many years. Back when I started residency, we were doing those operations still. What's changed? Why don't you see that surgery as much anymore?
Because we have medication.
So what's antibiotics is one. We figured out that there's a bug, and what else?
We can actually like go in and cut over those things.
No, but we have an ability to turn off the acid-producing cells completely, and that's, you get that drug over the counter now. You know, and so there's drugs that turn off the hydrogen pump that pumps acid into the stomach. Okay, and I think what is it? One of them is Prilosec. What's the other one?
Dentistry.
Yeah, Pepsi. Those weren't available back then. It wasn't until they figured out that mechanism they could design drugs that basically could shut off the acid-producing cells in the stomach. And so now it's like doing the operation, removing, you just shut them off. You know, and plus you take antibiotics and cure it too. You still see some complications of it. A lot of peptic ulcers will present the first time in somebody with full-blown perforation or bleeding. You know, and believe me, that happens to people in the ages 30s, 40s. I've seen it happen to 20-year-old. You know, where they're walking down the hall and boom, they fall down because now they got acid pouring out, and that pain is so bad it puts you on the ground. So that's the story of the vagus nerve, you guys. It's a really important nerve, and it controls a lot. And again, you need to monitor what's going on here. So that's what that sensory part is happening here. Okay. So all this stuff is going to collect sensory information and send it back up, so that you know what's happening. How do you know your stomach is full? It's going to be this nerve. How do you know your stomach is empty? It's going to be this nerve. Okay. Accessory nerve. Number 11. We're almost there. Purely motor, okay? We like it purely sensories and motors, don't we? This thing, you guys, since it's motor, it starts in the medulla, passes through that same hole, okay, jugular foramen, and it's going to get two sets of muscles. It's going to help with that pharynx swallowing. And remember, 9 did and 10 also did, and so now 11. So 9, 10, and 11 help with your swallowing, okay? And the other motor is it gets trapezius and the sternocleidomastoid. And so a real easy question to that is a person has an injury to a nerve and they're not able to shrug their shoulders. What nerve is it? This one. This is what the traps are going to do this. They're going to be able to help you elevate that. So you're going to lose that on one side. Okay. So this is kind of a funny looking nerve. It actually has a lot of input from the cervical regions. This is the input up here, and this is it. Remember, this is 9, 10, and this would be all 11 accessory. And so there's the accessory nerve. Here they are here, 9, 10, and 11. And it's going to the pharynx, motor, sternocleidomastoid, and trapezius.
So when people have heart attacks or strokes and they lose sensation on one side of the body or the other, is it because a lot of these major nerves have been affected or destroyed in some way?
Now, you said two things there, heart attacks
Well,
and
actually,
stroke.
stroke is
Stroke.
more, stroke
Yeah.
is more common for.
So when you talk about a stroke and that happens, what you're talking about, where's the lesion at? What's going on where, do you think?
Well, if it's on the left side, it would have happened on the right side.
Yeah, so it's up in the brain, it's in the central nervous system. So that's exactly it. And that's why you can have different strokes in different parts of the brain that are going to affect different things on the other side of the body. For example, if you notice, what we're just talking about is a lot of these cranial nerves are coming out in this brainstem right here. Notice a bunch of them right in the medulla oblongata, right? And so, for swallowing, for example, we need what nerves for swallowing? 9, 10, and 11. And here they are. If you notice, the motor part of all those were in the medulla. Now, if you go back into the brain lecture, and you look, and we covered the brain stem, and we talked about the function of each part, you'll look in the medulla. That's the early part of brain development, of evolution, and so these are very vegetative type things. If you look in there, we were talking about things like blood pressure control, heart rate, breathing, and swallowing. And what happens is, there's an artery that runs right on top of this brainstem called the basilar artery. And if you stroke that, it's called a basilar artery stroke. You're going to start stroking these out, and these people have real problems with swallowing. Now, they may have perfect motion in other parts of their body a bit, but they will usually have some problems with their face and their throat. Whereas somebody that strokes out up in that precentral gyrus area, on the frontal lobe, what was that? Motor cortex. You stroke up there, now what are you having problems with? Movement and stuff on that one side, you've got paralysis on that side. But you can have combinations of that. Now, what we looked at, if you go back in the lecture, you saw the temporal lobe was really involved with hearing and speech and stuff like this. And that's why now if you start stroking around what we call the middle cerebral artery in that area, you're going to catch some motor function, some sensory function in both the frontal parietal lobes near there. You're going to catch that temporal lobe. You're going to have problems with speech and motor movement and the whole thing. You know, so you're exactly right. It depends upon, one, where the stroke starts, and secondly, how big it is. You can have really kind of small ones, or you can have these really big, humongous strokes that basically got somebody that's just everything's out on that one side, and they're real dense strokes, they call those. You know? So, last nerve, yeah.
On that one it says internal VR and external VR, is that branch?
Yeah, branch, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, internal, so internal numbers. It didn't get to, it got to the muscles just inside the neck area. It didn't go out here to the other ones.
I thought the temporal lobe was only for hearing and smell. You say it's for speech too.
The speech centers are real close, right between the temporal lobe and the parietal lobe. There's a speech center right there on most people on the left side. On the left side, and you're using, if you think about it, it's a good location to have it because it's actually, you know, where that lateral sulcus comes in, and you have the temporal lobe, and then you have the parietal lobe. So what you really need for speech, in order to do that, you need to be able to move your mouth, but you also need to understand words of what you hear. And so you're going to use that information and then feed it up basically into that lower part of that precentral gyrus. So it's like a real critical area right there.
We're going to have to know the location of their speech on the show.
No, just whatever's in mind. Now, when we get into 6, we're going to go into that a lot more detail. So last cranial nerve, next with 2-2, with 1-1. Motor completely. This is controlling the muscles in your tongue, you guys. So if you cut this nerve, both of them, you're not going to be able to stick your tongue out at it. Okay. So again, it's in the medulla oblongata is the motor nuclei. It kind of makes sense. These are vegetative type functions, eating and things like this. Okay, swallowing. It's going to pass out through that special hole. That's why we learn that hole, the occipital bone, the hypoglossal canal. It has the same name as the nerve. And it goes to the muscles of the tongue. Okay, so it hits the muscles of the tongue. And so here it is right here. Now, notice, remember, we're along the side of the 3 nerves here, 9, 10, and 11, on the lateral side of that olive. For 12, what you do is you jump back up on the medial side of the olive between there and that medullary pyramid, and that's where that 12th nerve is, right there. And you can see it right here. See, there's the olive, there's 9, 10, and 11, and this is between the olive and that medullary pyramid. And it gets the tongue muscles. Okay, so while I got you here, you guys think you can do it? You want to try it? It's 12 of them. Follow the pattern. You ready? Systemic code. Glossopharyngeal. Vagus. Accessory. Hypoglossal. Those are the 12 right there. Okay. So you can make a chart like this, but I actually made it for you. This is how you want to do this, okay? You can memorize those, but now you may see questions coming at you really differently. Like one would be the lat practical. I shove a Q-tip through one of these holes and say, hey, what goes through it? And so as you come down, we can see the holes we just went through. Starting at the cribriform plate, cranial nerve 1, the octave canal, cranial nerve 2. Remember that supraorbital fissure? Look what we jammed through there. 3, which was octave motor. 4, what was 4? Trochlear. What was 5? Yeah, but which branch? Ophthalmic branch. I just include the branches. There we had 3 branches, that trigeminal. And then 6 was what? Abducens. So notice those all involve the eye. Then the other 2 branches of that trigeminal, maxillary, came through the foramen rotundum. The mandibular branch came through the foraminal valley. Internal acoustic medius, we shoved through there. 2 of them through there, facial and vestibular cochlear. In the stylomastoid foramen, that facial nerve came through there. Jugular foramen, 9, 10, and 11. Glossopharyngeal, vagus, and accessory. And finally, the hypoglossal through 12. Now, what's not on this list was those other little holes we talked about. Infraorbital foramen, supraorbital foramen up here. Those aren't on there. Okay? So here you can see kind of where your nerves are coming through. Okay? And it's not as bad as you think. Now, you can grasp something like this. Practice looking, making sure you know your Roman numerals. And what this side over here is basically some say marry money, but my brother says big brains matter more. I disagree with this. I think it's the opposite, and I tell my son that. And that tells you whether it's sensory, motor, or both, which would be mixed. Okay, if you want to do it that way. And then finally, if you're having troubles with the names, you need a mnemonic for the names. It would be on Old Olympus, towering top of fine Victorian gal, Buda hop. Again, you can do your own. And just go right down the line. It's going to be olfactory, optic, ocular, motor, trochlear, trigeminal, abducens, facial, vestibular, cochlear, glossal, pharyngeal, vagus, accessory, and hypoglossal. Okay. We okay with those? We gave you something to work with.
Yeah.
And again, this is actually the carpal bones are kind of a rite of passage. Cranial nerves are a little bit of rite of passage, but there's actually some really good clinical significance in all these nerves, to understand these. That you actually, can go out and say, yeah, I kind of understand some things now, like Bell's palsy, what's going on there. I showed a slide like this before. Now we're talking about spinal nerves. All those were coming out of the brain stem in the brain. That's why we call them cranial nerves. Here now are the spinal nerves. Remember, you have these segments. You had 31. We got 8 cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, 5 sacral, and then 1 coccygeal. Okay. And I kind of showed you how we numbered them the other day, right? Okay. So if you can remember that numbering system, okay. What 2 vertebrae does a T3 come out between? I got 3 and 4. I heard 2 and 3. Remember, cervicals are above the vertebrae, and everything else is below. So that means C8 comes out between what 2 vertebrae? C7 and T1. C7 and T1. Okay. So these all come out of the spinal cord. And you just happen to look at the spinal cord today in the lab, so you kind of get an understanding of how those come out a little bit. Okay? We looked at this the other day in the lab, too, that if you take one of these nerves, these peripheral nerves, and you cut it, it could be a named nerve, too, like a sciatic nerve, and you cut it, you're going to see that it's made of fascicles, which are groups of axons. And so you've got connective tissue around that whole nerve, and that was basically the epineurin, right? And then around each fascicle, there was connective tissue, that would be perineurin. And then around each axon is endoneurin. That's kind of a review, huh? And so this is showing you a nerve that's cut, and that's the epineurin. These are bundles of fascicles here. And then this would be 1 axon here. And you can see you have the perineurin. So here's perineurin around here. And then you're going to have basically endoneurin around each one of these axons. Okay. What are these big holes? Yeah, those are blood vessels. So, if you remember, when you came out of the spinal cord, you had those roots, a ventral root and a dorsal root. The dorsal root was carrying what? Sensory, I heard it. In the ventral root, motor. Which one had a bulge in it, a ganglia? Dorsal root ganglia, okay? So those combine to form the spinal nerves, okay? And so the spinal nerves are mixed. They got both sensory and motor in them, okay? And then they're going to divide it at the root. And those are what's passed through the, what's the IVS stand for? Interventricular foramen. Okay, remember that hole on the side? That's what they're passing through, okay? And so they're formed from that dorsal ventral roots. And what this shows you right here, these 4 things, is going to be for T1 through L2. Every place else in the cervicals and below T2, you're not going to have this white rami and gray rami communicantes. You're just going to have the dorsal ramus and ventral ramus. So what this means is that spinal nerve, when it comes out, it's going to now divide into other nerves. And this is from T1 through L2, this is what they're dividing into. And so you're going to see you're going to have a dorsal ramus and a ventral ramus. The ramus is just a branch of that spinal nerve. And what we're going to see is the dorsal one's going to go to things in the back. The ventral one's going to go to things in the front. And what we're going to see, this rami communicantes, this is the autonomic nervous system. And from T1 through L2, this is going to be sympathetic. Now, this I'm going to introduce a little bit to you now. We're going to look at it better when we do autonomic. So if you don't get this now, it's going to become clearer. Okay? So let me see if I've got a picture for you on this yet. Yeah. So there's our spinal cord. Okay? This is the ventral root, remember? What's this thing? Dorsal root ganglion. Okay? And so this right here would be the spinal nerve. See how they came in and joined? And now, we're making it real short here. This is now outside. This would be where that intervertebral foramen would be. And so this would be a dorsal ramus, a ventral ramus. And so the ventral ramus is going to go towards the front of the body. Remember, the spinal cord had a couple enlargements. What were those called? Cervical lumbar. And why were they there? What are those? And why are more nerves coming out and going in there? The arms and legs. So the nerves that are going to the arms and legs in those areas are all from the ventral ramus. Because that's all going kind of forward. The dorsal ramus is going to kind of get things in the back. Okay? Is what they're getting. And so you can see these coming out. Now, you can see here sensory is coming in. And so this is, these two things are the rami communicantes. Whoops, sorry, let me go back. Because I thought I was pointing out these nerves here for a second, but they're not on here. So this is sensory coming in here. And what one is supposed to be, blue is supposed to be for visceral, red is supposed to be for somatic. And so this would be a sensory coming in, bringing from visceral. So this is like maybe coming from the stomach. What's this bulge here called? General. Ganglion, a ganglion. Just like this ganglion. Why is it ganglion? Because it's outside the central nervous system. Remember, it's a collection of cell bodies. Okay, so you're having synapses in there. Okay. So we're going to have a gray and white rami communicantes. Let me show you the next couple slides and maybe you'll start making sense. I know this part's kind of premature. I've actually been thinking about eliminating these slides. I just haven't gotten around to it. Yeah. I figured you've seen it a couple times to start making sense. Now, right off the bat, the difference between these, both of these are rami communicantes. One is white and one is gray. Why do you think the one is white and the one is gray? Yeah, white and gray matter. So the white is going to have myelinated axons in it. The gray are going to have unmyelinated axons. They don't have cell bodies in it. Okay. T1 through L2, this is all going to be sympathetic. The white rami has myelinated axons, and what we're going to see in the sympathetic system, you have two neurons. What do we mean by that? Don't confuse me. When we, in the somatic nervous system, where do those axons go to? What type of effectors are those? Skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle, period. And those have a single neuron. So that the cell body is in the central nervous system. The axon goes all the way out and it hooks up to the muscle. Just one neuron. In the autonomic nervous system, we're going to visceral organs like the heart, the stomach, the lungs. It's a two-neuron system. the first neuron cell body is in like the spinal cord. It comes out as synapses with a second neuron. Now that goes to the organ. So that's why we call it a two neuron. And so that synapse is outside the spinal cord, and it's going to be in a ganglion. Because that's where you have synapses and cell bodies. And so that's why they call the first nerve going to the ganglion what? Preganglionic neuron. What would be the second neuron called? Postganglionic neuron. And so the preganglionic neuron has myelin, the post doesn't. Okay? Now, some of you right now are completely lost. I can see it in your faces. And I thought you'd say, okay, it's time to take a nap. My eyes are going out. That's okay. I'm still going to throw it at you because we're going to look at it in autonomic here in a little bit. Start looking at it, and you're going to see it again. Okay? So if you're not getting it now, we're going to get it again. So this first one comes out, and it's going to pass through the ganglion, or it can go, it's synapse in a ganglion, and we're going to look at other pathways that it can take. One of them is called splanchnic nerves. Don't worry about this. But it's myelinated. And that's why when it comes out, it goes through the white rami-communicative. Gray rami-communicative is the second nerve. And it's got fibers, and it's going to go then all the way to the organ, either smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, or to the glands. And basically, it's going to continue all the way out to the viscera. It's going to have to get there by usually going back into the spinal nerve. Let me kind of bring a picture of this. And again, it's unmyelinated gray. That's why it's called gray. Wow. You gotta be kidding me. So remember, ventral root, motor coming out, right? What's dorsal root? Sensory. And remember, this horn was called what? Anterior or ventral gray horn. This one would be lateral. And remember, this is somatic, this is visceral. So look at somatic. Red, it comes out ventral, it's going into the ventral ramus, it's going to skeletal muscle, period. End of story. One nerve. Okay? This is visceral motor. Autonomic, here in this case, sympathetic. The first nerve has myelin. See how it comes out? It goes through the white rami-communicative. This one happens to now synapse in a ganglion. The second nerve doesn't have myelin, goes to the gray rami-communicative and back out now to the organ. And that's what we mean. We're going to look at this in a little more detail. So, if you don't get it now, don't worry. We're jumping into this in autonomic nervous system coming up. So, the dorsal ventral ramus, that dorsal is going to be motor and sensory to the skin, muscles of the neck and back. Ventral ramus, motor, sensory to the ventral, lateral, so like maybe the muscles in the stomach, and also the extremities. Okay? You got to understand all these different levels. Just kidding. You'll see pictures like this, and what this is, you guys, is represents what we call dermatomes. And so really what you're looking at here is sensory. Okay? And this would represent the sensors in the skin. Okay? Now, the motor is going to be distributed a little bit different. You'll go to groups of muscles. Okay? So when you're looking at this, think of sensory. Okay? Think of sensory. And you can see, this is the anterior side of the body, posterior. Let's just pick a nerve out and look at it. Now remember, it tends to come out, the spine's back here, okay? So let's pick out, let's say like T3. This would be part of the dorsal ramus, and now it's going to wrap around and pick it up here. Here's T3 here. let's look at T7. See how I'm kind of wrapping around the body, and here it is here. So it's kind of coming up higher and wrapping around. C4. Here it is here. It's kind of getting to the top of your shoulder. Here's C5, wrapping around and getting this part of your arm. Your thumb, and this side here, C6, okay? Let's kind of see if we can find that up here. Here it is here, all along here. You don't see it up in the neck. So what this tells you is if you show up and you pretty much have a numb finger or a numb thumb, okay, the neurologist or your doctor can try and get a dermatome pattern out of it and maybe tell you where the problem is. For example, people with cervical disc disease, okay? In other words, they got bulging disc in their neck. A lot of times they'll get a distribution where they're having pain in the arm and numbness and tingling in certain fingers. And from that, you can kind of figure out maybe where that nerve is, okay? Same thing, sciatica. People with sciatica, do you know where their pain's at? Where do they feel their pain? Where? Yeah, usually down the back of the leg and down into here in the front of the leg. And so you're going to see that's too. This is part of the sciatic nerve coming down here. The other thing, does anybody in here ever have shingles? What's shingles? What the heck is that? What? Real big painful skin rash. What is it?
So you get chickenpox and the virus goes down in your system. And some people trigger it. Usually, my mom has it right now. That's why this is. But usually, like they think it's stress, but they don't really know exactly what will come out. And what it is it's a rash, but I think the sores are on every nerve ending, right? On the usually on the back, so it's very, very painful.
Right. Yeah. So did you guys catch that? It's a virus. It's related to chickenpox virus, and it is. If you had chickenpox, you can start getting shingles. What happens is you've gone through, you had chickenpox. Well, the virus didn't go away completely. It stayed in the nerve down towards the cell body, and it kind of, like you said, that lies dormant. It can get activated by different things. Stress is one, other things, illness. And what it does is then basically the virus comes out along the nerve path and affects the skin, the sensory along there. And what they'll have is they'll have a dermatome pattern where they'll have a skin rash that's very, very painful, and it'll look just like a band, and it will wrap along that dermatome path. And it'll be usually on one side. You know, it's rarely bilateral, but it could be. But it'll follow maybe a couple of those dermatome patterns. And it lasts several days. It's really painful. It causes a lot of misery, you know. And it's basically called shingles. Because it kind of has a shingle appearance to it, you know. And so you'll see that with a dermatome pattern, you know. So what am I going to ask you here off of this slide? I'm not going to ask you the different dermatomes or anything like that. I just want you to have seen this. So that down the road, you can kind of relate to it and understand, yeah, now I know why there's these distributions. And you can use this clinically. This is used a lot clinically, okay? Now, there's something called plexuses, okay? And for some of you, you're gonna hate this. Others, you're gonna say it's not too bad. What a plexus is remember those spinal nerves that are coming out like C4, C5, and these? Well, what happens is in that ventral distribution, those ventral ramuses that go to the arms and legs and stuff, those nerves come out and they start mixing up and crossing and kind of making combinations that can be kind of complex. And so that's why we call it a plexus. Okay? And so the ventral ramus comes out, and adjacent ones cross, and you get different mixtures of nerves. Okay? And so you get all these different weird nerve trunks that happen. And they intertwine. And you look at it and you go, that's nuts if I have to understand that. Okay? It's not as bad as you think. So the nerve plexus that you have to learn and know about are the four main ones. There's the cervical plexus, a brachial plexus, a lumbar, and a sacral plexus. Okay? And so these four, we're going to learn something about each one. Not too bad. The worst one that you're going to learn will be the brachial plexus. So these are the plexuses here. That would be a cervical plexus. A brachial is going to go to the arm. The lumbar and sacral plexus are going down to the lower extremity. Okay? And I'm going to walk you through each one of these, what you need to know for each one. Okay? We okay with this? Cervical plexus. So what you need to know from this has a lot more to it than what I have up here, is the plexus comes from these spinal nerves C1 through C5. So we're talking C1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So they contribute and make up the plexus. The nerve, I only want you to know one nerve out of this plexus, and that's the phrenic nerve. So this is where the phrenic nerve comes through from. And it's going to come off of this plexus. In the lab, we're going to see it travels on the anterior surfaces of the anterior scalene. Then it goes down and travels along the sides of the esophagus, close to the heart. It comes right along the side of the pericardium and innervates your diaphragm. So if you cut that nerve, your diaphragm on that side would not work. Okay? And so that phrenic nerve out of that plexus is made up of, has branches from C3, 4, and 5. How do you remember that? C3, 4, 5 keeps you alive, or keeps the diaphragm alive. And that's why people with high cervical injuries, at about C3 or C4, you cut that nerve completely, they lose their diaphragm and they can't breathe. Who was the perfect example of that? Superman, yeah, Christopher Reeve. High cervical fracture, got bucked off a horse or something, had a high cervical injury, and he had a trach, and he was on long-time ventilation. Okay? And it shows you, Superman can get killed by something besides kryptonite. So, here they are, see 1, 2, 3, 4. You look at this, this is the plexus right here. Yeah, aren't you glad you don't have to learn all that? But the nerve that you need to know is just the phrenic nerve out of there. And in the lab, I'll show you where it's located at. Okay? It's made up of branches of C3, 4, and 5. Okay? That's the most you got. Now, there's a lot more to the cervical plexus. It gets these different, has different branches to it. But this is the only thing you need to know off of this one. Okay? Any questions on this? Brachial plexus. First thing you know about this is the brachial plexus is has input from spinal nerves C5 through T1. Now notice cervical plexus also has C5 in it. So that means that you get branches that go to both those plexuses. Okay? And so the first thing that happens with the brachial plexus is those nerves come out, they form trunks, like the trunks of a tree. And you have 3 different trunks. You've got a superior trunk, a middle trunk, and an inferior trunk. And you need to know that you've got those 3 trunks and what spinal nerves contribute to it. So the superior trunk gets branches from C5 to C6. The middle trunk is C7 by itself, and the inferior trunk is C8 and T1. And so that's the first thing that happens is the trunk. Can I close the door back there? Because I thought I heard a baby crying.
Yeah.
I might start giving milk productions. So here they are, C5, 6, 7, 8, T1, and they come out and they form the superior trunk, middle, inferior. And so C5 and C6 form that first superior trunk, C7 alone, C8 and T1 form that trunk. So that's the first thing that you need to know about the brachial plexus. C5 through T1, superior, middle, inferior trunks, and what contributes to it. The next thing that happens is it forms divisions. There's 2 divisions, an anterior and posterior division. This, we don't see good on the model, so all I want you to know is that there's an anterior and posterior division. I'm not going to ask you which branches go where, okay? And just to kind of show it to you, that's these right here, anterior, posterior, okay? Now you can see there's some mixing going on here, you have three chords. Now, I'm not going to ask you, oops, sorry. I'm not going to ask you, but it's written here. It's telling you what divisions contribute to the chord. I'm not going to ask you that. In other words, the medial chord is made up of branches from the anterior, a division of the inferior trunk. I'm not going to ask you that, okay? But you do need to know the chords, okay? Now, when you get to the chords, one way to remember is look at the arm. Remember your anatomical position like this? You have a medial side, a lateral side, and then just think of posterior, okay? So these are the trunks, these are the divisions. Here's the lateral chord, medial, and posterior. And how can you tell on here? Because as in my arm's like that, that nerve is out here on the lateral side, this one's on the medial side, okay? And so those are the chords, the three chords. So we kind of, you've got to know those trunks, just know there's an anterior, posterior division, but know these three chords, okay? Now, what you got to do is what do the chords turn into? First off, the easiest one to remember is the posterior chord. It just turns into these two nerves. Okay? The radial nerve and the axillary nerve. And then we're going to see what those go to. Okay? So you got the radial axillary nerve. The lateral chord is going to give you the musculocutaneous nerve, okay? And a branch of it will make up the median nerve. The medial chord will turn into the ulnar nerve, and a branch of it will also make up the median nerve. So the median nerve gets contribution from both the lateral and the medial chords. The rest of the lateral chord becomes a musculocutaneous. The rest of the medial chord becomes the ulnar nerve. Yeah? Here's those chords. Which one was this? Posterior. So if you look at this, here's the lateral chord, forms musculocutaneous, and gives a branch to the median nerve. Okay? The medial chord gives you the ulnar nerve and gives a branch to the median nerve. And then finally, I think it's on the next slide, yeah, the posterior chord gives you the axillary and the radial nerve. These are just branches of the radial nerve. Okay? And so, we went from trunks to divisions to chords, now to basically these named nerves. And that was musculocutaneous, ulnar, median, axillary, and radial. So what do those guys go to? Holy cow. Here's that brachial plexus. There's the axillary nerve. Axillary nerve is a branch of the posterior chord, and it gets your deltoid and teres minor. Musculocutaneous is the branch of the lateral chord, and it basically gets your anterior flexors. So what would be some of those flexors of the arm? Biceps brachii and brachialis. Radial nerve is the other branch, basically, of the posterior chord. This gets all the extensors down the whole back of both the arm and the forearm. So triceps brachii, all those extensor carpi, and all those things. Okay. Median nerve, that's the one that goes through the carpal tunnel. That's the one that gets nailed in the carpal tunnel. That's getting flexors in the forearm, mostly to the lateral side, okay, and into the hand. And then finally, the ulnar nerve is more on the medial side, but it's getting flexors, mostly on the medial forearm. So this actually is good enough for me, okay? Now remember, ulnar musculocutaneous originate musculocutaneous comes from the lateral cord, ulnar comes from the medial cord. Median is a branch from both of those, okay? I know you're going, you gotta be kidding me. There's that axillary again. These are branches of the posterior cord and the radial, okay? This is what comes from the posterior cord.
In terms of the homework, what do you want us to do for description on this?
Pretty much what I got here, as long as you know those muscle groups.
Because you just showed, basically you just showed what muscles they and nerve they, but what would you say for description of that?
The description, like I said, what did I say about the description on the homework, you guys?
What makes you remember it?
Yeah, what makes you remember where it's at?
Okay.
It's for you.
So the description might be like the.
It's on the ulnar nerves on the medial side of the forearm, you know? And you're going to see these nerves in the lab. And so that's where you're really going to figure your description out, when we look at it in the lab. So in the lab, we're going to point these nerves out on the arms and stuff, and then you'll say, okay, now I know where it's at, and you'll probably write that for your description. Here again, it's the axillary, radial, these are branches of the posterior cord. Musculocutaneous, that was a branch of the lateral cord, and also gave to the median nerve. Both cords go to the median nerve. And then here's the ulnar nerve. So you're going to see that musculocutaneous is going to just be right up here in the forearm. The ulnar is going to travel all the way down. Now, remember this is the medial side of your forearm, right? Okay. What was this thing in the bone called right here? Medial epicondyle. Remember when you looked at the humerus? You had a medial and lateral epicondyle. If you remember back, if you can picture that humerus, that medial epicondyle kind of stuck out. And there was like a groove underneath it. And that's where that ulnar nerve travels. And what happens when you hit that real hard? That's your funny bone. So what are you hitting? Is you're hitting that ulnar nerve right there. Put your finger on that medial epicondyle. How can I find it? Move your elbow. It doesn't move. Now, slide your finger back behind it in that groove. If you're brave enough, shove down in there and see if you can feel that ulnar nerve. Do you feel it back in there? Yeah. That's where it's at. Yeah. Okay, so you want to hurt somebody or stop your kid, just grab them right there. You know, just go for that. That's almost like a reverse squat. You kind of feel that anatomy there? That's your funny bone. Nothing funny about it. I've never understood that. I think it's called the funny bone because everybody else laughs at you when they see you going.
It really doesn't hurt you. Well, I know what I'm saying.
Here's your brachial plexus. You can see how this is. Now I'm not going to ask you to name these nerves in here, but you can see them, okay? And these different nerves. This thing right here, is that a nerve? No, it's not. That's the axillary artery. Now, one thing I point this out. Actually, we had somebody last semester that did kind of dissected this out on the guy cadaver. We got this kind of splayed out a bit. But one thing is, some of these nerves can get injured, and one of the surgeries where they get injured at is axillary dissection. We used to do a lot of axillary dissections in women that had breast cancers, because you want to take all the lymph nodes out of here, because that's where the cancer would go to. And so you would do formal axillary dissections, and you had to kind of be really careful in that area, because you could easily, injure one of those nerves. Lumbar plexus. The lumbar sacral plexus aren't going to be as hard as the brachial. We don't have cords and trunks. Okay. So, first thing you need to know about the lumbar plexus is from spinal nerves T12 through L4. And so this is it right here. Okay. And you can see it's kind of a mixture. It's a plexus. And so there's two nerves you need to know here. The femoral nerve and the occipitator nerve. Both of them have branches from L2, 3, and 4. Okay? And I'll show you where these nerves are. The femoral nerve is going to come down and just come into the anterior thigh. And it's just going to get the extensors of the knee, the quadriceps. Okay? The operator nerve is actually going to come through that operator foramen, and it's going to get the medial compartment, and it's just going to get the adductors. So, not too hard, and we'll show you these nerves, on the models. Okay? It's not too bad. So here's the arm, leg. Here's the lumbar plexus up here. Femoral nerve is coming down. And if you guys remember in your anatomy, we're going to look at it closer when we do veins, that nerve is right here in the groin. And it's actually, it goes from lateral to medial. You have 4 structures. Femoral nerve, in, the femoral artery, the femoral vein, and then femoral lymphatics. And the reason I tell you guys this is because some of you are going to be in the ICU or elsewhere, okay? And you're going to have to draw blood, and you can't get it out of the veins, and so you're going to have to basically find that femoral vein. And so it goes nerve, artery, vein, lymphatics, navel, going from lateral to medial. You're not going to see the vein. It's deep. It's not like a vein here. But you got to get a needle in it. How do you find the nerve, the vein? By the pulse of the artery. So you have the person laying, if they're like this, head down here, you're on this side, you feel the pulse, you get your fingertip on the pulse. So now I've got my fingertip on the arterial pulse. I just have to remember my anatomy, because I don't want to put the needle in the artery, because then you can have arterial nick, and that's going to bleed like snot. What you want to do then is say, oh wait, do I put it on the medial side of that, on the lateral side? Now, if you guys know your anatomy, you're going to stick it, if the person's laying here, the head's down there, you're going to stick it on the medial side, and you'll get it right in the vein. What's going to happen if you forgot your anatomy and you stuck it on the lateral side? You just nailed that nerve. You think that person's going to be happy? Believe me, that's what happens. The other time this is important is in the cath lab. Anywhere in the cath lab or in radiology, because we put catheters in here. If you're going to cath the heart, they're going to go on the femoral artery. If you've got a cath the right side of the heart, you're going to go on the femoral vein and come up and come in through the right ventricle, into the right atrium, right ventricle, and cath it that way. And also, you'll see Swan-Ganz catheters we put through here too. And so, and sometimes you'll even do blood gases out of that artery. So that's why it's kind of important to know. And that's where that nerve is right there. Here's that operator coming through the operator foramen, getting that medial compartment, right there. Sacral plexus. Not too bad. It's, what you need to know, it's from L4 through S4. Here it is here. Remember, L4 was also up in the lumbar plexus, so you actually get a branch from both coming down here. And you get this, that's the lumbosacral trunk coming down to it. The nerve you need to know coming off here is the sciatic nerve. Now, remember, femoral nerve got what compartment? Anterior. The operator? Yeah, medial. The sciatic gets everything posterior and below the knee. Real simple. So all that rest of that is sciatic nerve. But we're going to see, for our anatomy, we're going to divide it into another couple, 2 or 3 nerves. So remember that big nerve in order to find the piriformis muscle? It came out right below it. Here it is, the big sciatic nerve. As it comes down in the leg, it's going to branch, and one branch is going to stay posterior, and it's going to get the posterior part of the leg. That's the tibial nerve. The other one is going to form something called a common fibular nerve. And what happens to that is one branch stays superficial and wraps around the head. What bone is that? fibula. The other one, branch, goes between that interosseous membrane. And so that one that goes through the interosseous membrane on the anterior side stays really deep. And that's the deep fibular nerve. And so what it's getting is that anterior compartment of the leg, and it's getting the dorsiflexors. Whereas this one that comes around the head of the fibula is going to get the lateral compartment, it's going to get that fibularis muscle. And so, what nerve gets nailed in the crosswalk? What usually will hit a person in a crosswalk? A car. And so what's usually hitting them? The bumper. And where's the bumper at? It's going to crush that fibula, hit that fibula. You're going to nail that superficial branch, and now you've knocked out your fibularis. Okay? See? That happens enough. Here's the superficial and the deep, right there. Looking at it this way, here's piriformis, remember? Sciatic. Now, as soon as it divides, now what you're going to see in the models, you guys, and in some people, that sciatic where it divides can be down low like this, or it can be high up here. It could be different places. But as soon as the sciatic splits, the one that stays posterior is the tibial, and then this common, and then the common is going to branch into a superficial that stays on the outside of the fibula. Whoops, I did it again, didn't I? A superficial that stays on the outside of the fibula, and the deep that goes through the interosseous membrane and stays deep in the leg. So we'll look at these on the lab, okay? You'll see these. What I just went through, you guys, on both cranial and peripheral is all that homework on that side of those last 3-4 pages. Okay? So it kind of shows you what you need to know there. The descriptions, again, you can start kind of writing it, but I would really wait for what you see in the lab, because that's what you're going to use for in the lab practical to study off of, so that you know what you're looking for in the models. You know what I mean? Now, spinal reflexes. What's a reflex, you guys? How do you react to something? It's a nerve. What would somebody say here? Voluntary?
Automatic response.
Involuntary. It's a real quick reaction to something that usually is involuntary, and we're going to kind of look at what makes those up. And so, in order to get a reflex, if you stop to think about it for a second, you need several things. First, you need a sensor. You need to figure that something happened. And so, you're going to have a sensory nerve bringing data after in. Then, you're either going to have some processing or very minimal processing, and then you're going to fire a nerve going out as an effector. Happens very fast. When we do 6, we'll look at some reflexes. The one you know constantly is that patellar reflex. Okay, don't have to think about it. So, you've got to have a receptor that senses some type of change. You've got to have the nerve going in, the sensory nerve, traveling in. And then, it's going to go connect to the central nervous system. We're going to see some of them just connect directly to the effector nerve. Some of them have some interneurons and maybe some little bit of processing. But then you have a motor nerve that comes out, okay, and it goes to an effector. And the effector, again, we're going to see the different types. It could be skeletal muscle, smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, or gland. Okay. So this is out of your book. It shows you how we look at reflexes, different, how we categorize them, how we can name them. Over here on this side is where the heck is it at? Is this a spinal reflex, or is this a cranial reflex? Okay? And so these would be cranial nerves, these would be those spinal nerves we just talked about. The complexity of it. Does the sensory nerve come in and just synapse with the motor nerve? That would be a monosynaptic Or is there other things that go on? Polysynaptic. Is this a somatic reflex, like that patellar reflex, your skeletal muscle, or visceral? A visceral reflex, pupil dilation, micturition reflex that we looked at. You know, you got into your bladder. There's all kinds of other visceral reflexes we'll talk about later. Is this an acquired reflex or an innate? What do we mean by that? Right, innate was you're born with it. We can see this in babies. Give me an innate reflex in a baby. Suckling. What was that?
Or when you stroke the bottom of their foot or
Yeah, they're curling their foot. The startle reflex. Babies do this. You know? So there's a whole bunch of little innate reflexes in babies. Acquired, you kind of got to learn it. Give me an example of an acquired reflex.
Baseball bat swing.
Yeah, baseball bat swing, exactly. Anything that happens quick. You guys drive. Do you have to really put a lot of thought into something that happens quick to put your brakes on? But if you remember, when you learned to drive, it took you a while to put the brakes on. Now you do it really quick. And so that's kind of an acquired reflex. You know, you kind of learn it, okay? A complex dive, a guy does a dive. You know, when you first learn it, it really takes part, but after a while, it's second nature. It's an acquired reflex. So what are we talking about? Is right here, a monosynaptic. We're going to see a receptor in the muscle gets stretched. It comes through and connects directly with the motor neurons. It fires. Here, a sensor in the skin comes in. There's some interneurons here, and then it fires the motor. An example of this would be, I touch something hot. Do I have to think about removing my finger? No. But at the same time, I need to know that. And so I need to send information up to my cortex, to my sensory cortex that says, hey, I just touched something really, really hot. And so there's now some ascending tracks that have to take place with this. And also, you've got more than one muscle group. An example of this is I step on a tack. Okay? I step on a tack, the pain is going to make me do several things, which is kind of complex. First, I got to unload. I got to get off the tack. To get off the tack, though, I got to be able to balance on the other leg. And then I also got to know that I have that pain there. This is a stretch reflex, and I'm going to show you an example of that. Here, if you stretch a muscle real quick, you have stretch receptors that sense this. They fire in there, and they cause the muscle to contract, to go the opposite, to resist the stretch. It's a protective mechanism so that the muscle doesn't get stretched too far. And the perfect example of that is a patellar reflex. You hit the patellar tendon, it stretches the muscle, it goes through and fires, and the leg does it. If you do this, and we'll do these in 6, you don't feel it. You don't get any sensation up here. In fact, if you close your eyes, you don't even know anything happens because you might feel your leg moving. But it's going to happen whether you want it to happen or not. Wow, I finished.